Dr. Itoro Emembolu. Dr. Itoro Emembolu has over 18 years cognate experience in the areas of research and education, project management, monitoring and evaluations, program design and implementation, business strategy, knowledge management, and data analysis. She holds a honors degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Ado-Ekiti, Nigeria, an MSc honors in international business, energy and petroleum from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, an MPhil in management and strategic management from Lagos Business School and Atlantic University, Nigeria, and a PhD in computer networks and security from Northumbria University, Newcastle, United Kingdom. Her PhD focus was on impact evaluation of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM interventions. She commenced her career in the telecommunications sector, where she worked with Huawei Technologies and OEM and Globacom, the telecommunications provider. She was the general manager for Noble Sciences Nigeria Limited, an indigenous engineering services, production, and consultancy firm. She has also done research for Lagos Business School from Atlantic University, data analysis and impact evaluation from Northumbria University at Newcastle, UK, and is currently engaged as a researcher at the University of Alberta, Canada. Itoro is a director at TechQuest STEM Academy, a non-profit technology education provider that has delivered digital skills and capability building programs across Africa, impacting over 33,000 people. She is also a director at Quest Sage Limited, an IT architecture service provider in Nigeria, and a committee member on education and technology on the Africa Advocacy Program of the ACCA. Dr. Emembolu is a member of the UK Evaluation Society, Energy Institute UK, the British Education Research Association, IEEE Education Society, IEEE Women in Engineering, IEEE Young Professionals, and the British Academy of Management. She has authored and co-authored 13 academic publications and several non-academic articles. She features as a speaker at seminars and events across Africa and Europe. Let's make welcome Dr. Itoro Emembolu.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ma, for coming. Yes. I'm so excited to have you here, and it's such an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Can I share my slides?
Yes, please, you can.
Okay. Can you see the slides now?
Yes, please, we can.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I've listened to some of the other sessions. They are really insightful, and I'm just very happy to participate in this. So I will just start with a brief introduction of who I am and what we do at TechQuest. We've already talked about what I do. So TechQuest is a not-for-profit organization, and we provide technology education, content, resources, and tools for digital literacy, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths, and capability building program. Basically, we are trying to bridge the digital divide across board. Today, I'll be speaking on leveraging technology in research for data-driven solutions in education. And I'll be going through the following. We'll talk about data. What is it about data? Why data is important, and what it means to be, when we talk about being data-driven, what are the challenges in using data for decision making, and how we could leverage technology for research, and how we make sense of the data, and how we also do it at TechQuest also, and then some suggestions on how we could achieve data-driven solutions. So I will just take that one at a time, and please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. I'll be happy to take them as we go along. Okay, so first of all, talking about data, we hear data, everybody's talking about data here and there. So I just kind of like put a short definition of what data is. It's really about the information that we're trying to use for processing or used for trying to make decisions. And then they consist of things like statistics, they could be figures, they could be facts, they could be records, different types of evidence that are there. And it's quite interesting that over the past few years, the amount of data that we have in the world has increased significantly. As of 2016, they were like the amount of data has kind of like doubled, tripled, since if you start looking at it from like 2008 and above, it has increased significantly. As of now, at the end of 2021, the amount of data that has been used, captured, copied, stored, it was estimated at about 79 zettabytes. And now trying to put that in context, a lot of times we talk about megabytes or 1 gig, 1 gigabyte. So this 79 zettabytes, it refers to a trillion. 1 zettabyte is a trillion gigabytes. So that shows how large the data has, how large the amount of data is. And also still trying to put that in perspective, as at 2016, a Cisco estimate put the amount of data that we had in the world at that time, it was at 1 zettabyte. That was as at 2016. As at 2018, it went up to about 18. Now we're at 2020, at the end of 2021, it has gone up to 79, and it's estimated that in the next 3 or 4 years to go up to 170 something. So that shows that data is everywhere, and it's not looking like it's going to slow down at any point in time. And it's here to stay for the next few years. So it's very important that we see how we can try and make use of this data, because everything we do, when we go online, produce data, you log into your phone and perform some services on it, you produce data. When you chat with someone, you produce data. In fact, just going online, you've already started generating some form of data. So the amount of data is huge. And it's a very interesting thing for researchers, because that expands the amount, the kind of innovative ways we can explore this data, the innovative ways we can use it, the ways that we can make sure that we're making good decisions based on what is out there. Before, a lot of times, some of these informations were not available, but now that they are available, it's important to start using them to make decisions that will impact research, academia, and our community at large. So talking about data-driven, because like the topic is trying to make sure that we are leveraging technology and trying to create data-driven solutions. So when we talk about data-driven, it's actually trying to use this data, analytics or analysis that we get from this data, how we interpret data, and using it to make good decisions. So it's trying to see how we make those decisions based on evidence that we see, rather than, oh, I just think that that's possible. Oh, if we do this, I think this is what will happen. So we're not using our intuition, or we're just not using what we feel might work. We're actually trying to see based on evidence that is out there, based on data that is out there. There's a lot of data. So if we harness it, then we'll be able to make good decisions on that. And with big data, and like I said, the amount of data, it's incredible, the prospects and the ways that we could go on with this. And so for that, since we're going to be using the results from the data, it's very important that we talk about how data is being analyzed and what we mean by data analysis when we talk about data analysis. So I'm just trying to talk about some of these main things that really come up when we talk about data. So it's important understanding these concepts, and then we go into how we've been using it and how we've applied it also within our organizations and within our communities. So data analysis is the process of how we look at data, how we review data, how we inspect data, how we clean the data, we transform it into, because a lot of times when we receive data, some of the data don't come in usable format. So the way you collect data is not the same way everybody is able to analyze that data. So sometimes the data has to go through a cleaning process, a transforming process to be able to make it usable. And once we're able to make it usable, we're able to now make informed decisions around that, around the data. And really, as educators, we actually make use of data a lot, even where we feel that we don't have as much data there. For teachers, we use the students' results, make decisions based on their performance. Even within the workspaces as project leads, we make decisions on reports that we get, statuses of projects. Then we use that to decide how can we improve on the project, how can we make changes to the project where necessary. And within TechQuest too, we also use data a lot, and we try to make sure that it's data driven, because anytime we try to engage with our communities, a lot of times we try to set objectives, what we're trying to achieve, and based on that, we collect like baseline, we collect data, or we use surveys and interviews, reports to try and get a setting on, okay, this is where they've been and this is what we want to achieve, such that at the end of our project, we're able to now baseline and check the baseline and see, have we made an impact? So we use it in different forms and in different ways. So it's very important that we consider using data to drive what we want to do, because it helps us to decide, it helps us to evaluate, have we achieved what we want to do? Most projects, most research work, we are trying to find out something, you're trying to achieve something, and with the use of data, then you are able to achieve your goal faster, you're able to reach it faster. You're able to evaluate the processes that you are using, and you are now able to also decide that, okay, have you achieved the goal? Have you reached where you are going? So it's very important. The data analysis aspect of it is very important to be able to make accurate or decisions that are more aligned with what you are going to do. And the same way we talk about data, there are so much type of data that if you don't collect the right type of data, then the kind of results that you get out of it will be subpar. It won't be up to what you want it to do. So sometimes they say when you collect data, it's so much, it could be whatever you give in is what you use to get results. So sometimes they say garbage in, garbage out. So as much as you put in, whatever it is you put in, it is based on that, the results that you get. So it's important that we make sure that we collect the right type of data, and then we analyze the data appropriately to get solutions out of that. Okay. So there are some challenges that particularly in places like Nigeria, when it comes to using data. And I think one of the main issues that we have is access to data. So we have different people, like I said, in our organization, we collect our own data, and I'm sure a lot of other organizations collect theirs. Educators collect their data, universities collect their, schools collect their data, surveys, I mean, a lot of them are very rich types of data, but the problem is, are people also able to access this data? So when this data is collected, who sees it? Where can we access it? Because sometimes you collect data and you want to infer based on maybe like a group of people or a category of people. And sometimes you can infer based on the ones you have, but sometimes you want to also expand it to be able to generalize it. So while you can generalize, while you can estimate or kind of like infer what could happen, it would be also very interesting to be able to analyze based on wider, bigger data, more representative data of the population. So also being able to compare data, that's very good. But then the issue is that, where do we find this data? People are having their data in small silos. They are not sharing data. So that access to data is not as common. And while I'm saying that, that's not to say that we don't have some data sources that are there. I will still come back to that when I'm talking about data repositories that we have. We do have some, the National Bureau of Statistics and others, where we could get some general data about the Nigerian populace. But majority of the time is access to data is a problem. The other thing is data interoperability. When I talk of data interoperability, that means is the ability for there to be exchange or interactions with data. So when you are sharing data, so the way different people, different organizations, different researchers collect their data, sometimes it might just be useful to them, and the way it has been collected, other people are unable to use the data. So there's that need for data to be put in a format that is easily usable by other people, easily usable by other systems. They're able to take in the data and make it useful and accessible to others. So it's very important to make sure that that happens also. And also, so that means there has to be some consideration in how we collect this data, how the data is collected. So even before going to collect data, especially the data that you're trying to collect or information or surveys you're trying to collect, you need to think about how would this data be represented. You want it, is there a way you can represent it that it can be easily used by other people? So that's one way. One of the main other challenges that are there. And it ties into the next one, finding the right type of data. So when we talk about finding the right type of data, is what are we actually trying to do? What kind of questions are we asking? So it still ties to trying to make the data usable by other people, but also usable for your project. So are you asking the right questions? The kind of questions you're asking, the responses you get, can you infer from that? Are you trying to collect quantitative data? I'll still come back to that, or qualitative data, that's contextual data, or are you trying to collect data that are numerical? So the responses you're trying to get, can you infer from that, from numerical data you collect? So the type of data that you collect is very important. The questions you ask before collecting the data. So there has to be that reflection. So just going to collect data for decision making is not the beginning point. The beginning point is actually reflecting on what do you need the data for? Why are you collecting it? So if you collect it, how would you be able to infer from it? So those questions need to come in before you actually collect data, if you are collecting it. So, and if you do that, it even makes it easier for people that want to use that data at a later point in time. They're able to infer from it. And it makes it easier, it makes it shareable, that other people are able to use the data. Because right now we're moving from that era where everybody has their own data to more open source, where we have data that people can collaborate on, people can infer from, people can share. So as researchers, we're also supposed to start thinking about how can we even create that type of data that we can share. So we want people to be able to take data from Nigeria and be able to use it wherever they are. We want people to be able to take this data from Africa and they're able to use it wherever they are. So we must collect it in a way that we're able to capture, we're able to share that data, we're able to use it. And then the next challenge, which has been there, but I think has been highlighted more with the amount of data we have, is the proficiency in using that data. So how do people analyze this data? So there's a lot of data in nearly everything we do. You could almost collect data anywhere. But how do we analyze that data? So you've collected that information. How are you able to review it and infer from it, you're able to come to conclusions that you would use to make decisions. So the end point is not just to collect data for the sake of collecting data, but you're collecting it because you're trying to use it to create solutions. You're trying to use it to make decisions. So it's important that that aspect is analyzed properly. So the one aspect is that there's so much information everywhere. People, it's like where do I start from? And then the other thing is, okay, you have this data. Do you have the technical skills? Do you have the proficiency or the competency to analyze the data appropriately? There are people that specialize in different types of data analysis. So there are actually different ways to analyze data. So at the same time, while you might not have the proficiency or the skills, it's also important to collaborate with people that have those proficiency and skills, or identify them to be able to make more impactful conclusions or inferences from data that has been acquired. Okay. So how do we, what are the ways that we can leverage technology? Because technology is here to stay and it is constantly changing, new things are coming up. So it's not enough to just know about some of it. You have to actually take action and make, see how one can incorporate or benefit from the technology that is there. It's now underscoring nearly everything we do. One of the ways that we could leverage technology for research is through collaborations. And technology has made collaborations easier with the different platforms. Now, even with for example, through the COVID pandemic, people are able to collaborate while you are here in Nigeria. You're collaborating very easily with people all over the world. We're able to make use of collaborative tools. We're able to collaborate on research, documents online, real time. So it has made that easier. And it's important that we try to leverage on that. We try to make use of that. We explore the different collaborative platforms, the different collaborative means, technologies that are there. We explore them and make use of them. That's one way that we could leverage technology. And you could also use it for learning purposes. You could learn from people all over the world. These days, you are not restricted to just learning from yourself or learning in a classroom or in a school. Yeah, you can learn, you can be here and you are learning from a professor in China or a professor in Canada. And so you can also at the same time collaborate on research projects that way. So collaboration is a very key thing to be able to leverage technology for research. The other thing is, like I mentioned, data warehouses. Now with cloud computing, where you are not restricted to the amount of data that you can store. There's now, you have infinite, or you have large repositories that could be used. So it is building on that and now using those repositories, getting data warehouses to be able to store that data that we can use to make decisions. So it's very important that, like I mentioned, in Nigeria, we have a couple of them. We have the National Bureau of Statistics. We have the Federal Ministry of Education. You could go there and get data from there. There's the Nigerian Data Portal that you could get, and then that's just some of them in Nigeria. Then you could also, there are also international organizations that have repositories on data that has been collected, because sometimes collecting this data can be expensive. So for small organizations, researchers that are, maybe they are not in a wider team, you would want to build from data that has been collected on a larger scale. So sometimes that's where you get some of these larger repositories like National Bureau of Statistics, Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics, or World Bank, or IMF, International Monetary Fund, UNESCO. So they have repositories where you could actually collect data, analyze the data, infer from that data, and then even see how it compares to data that you collect within your communities and all of that. So there are also tools that have been made available that we could build on to analyze this data. So whilst some of it requires technical skills, there are technologies that have been created that would help you analyze the data. So it's just knowing what to do, and then it runs through, it runs the analysis for you. One of the very common ones is Google Analytics. So you are able to analyze huge amounts of data, small amounts of data, whatever type of data you have, you are able to analyze it and build on that. So these are just some of the ways that you could leverage technology. And so doing that, that's for if you are using the tools that are there. Then even as a researcher, where you have some skills, you could have mixed skills where you're able to analyze qualitative data or you're able to analyze quantitative data. But at the same time, there are also tools that made it easier to analyze data. Like for qualitative analysis, we have things like NVivo, where you don't have to manually code maybe text that you see. You have a system that is able to help you to make that process easier. There's the Atlas T, and then for the quantitative ones, and then they are the ones that are free, and then they are the ones that are paid. So most of the paid free ones, they are open source. They call them open source. So they make the code available so that you're able to analyze your data using the open source that is there, particularly for quantitative analysis, for quantitative researchers. So some of the very common ones are Python, but that's using the programming language Python. Then there's the Tableau, where it helps you for data visualization. And then we have the R and the R Studio. It helps with visualization and analysis. So these are some of the ways that you could make sense of data and some of the resources that are available that one could use as a researcher. You use that to leverage, and then you're able to get more insights from the data that you have. So talking about achieving, oh, apologies, I think there's an error there. Achieving data-driven solutions in education. The main thing, and I always say it, is we need to adopt technology. So the different technology solutions are there, different technologies are available to us, different platforms, different tools, different resources. So it's not enough to just know about them and to be aware about them, but the other thing is to adopt them, adopt the different technologies that are there. And to do that, one of the barriers to that is some of those digital skills to do that. So it's important that even though as researchers, we have people that are highly skilled in some of the analysis, even those tools and resources we use, they constantly go through upgrades, they constantly add new functionalities, they add new easier ways to do things. So as researchers that already know some of this, we need to relearn and upskill regularly. So personally, I'm an advocate of lifelong learning. So we constantly need to learn as researchers, as educators, even as project leads, project managers, whichever aspect you are, or whichever sector you work in, you need to constantly upskill, because things are constantly changing. Technology is constantly changing. New things are changing. There are upgrades, regular upgrades. So you just need to constantly make sure that you are able to use the new tools that are there when they're there. And then the other thing is better and intentional data practices. So when I talk about intentional data practices, I'm saying things like thinking about how that data is being collected before it's being collected. And then even ethical data practices, like don't just collect data for the sake of collecting it. What do you want to use it for? How do you want to use it? Those will inform how the data is collected, how you present the data, how you preserve the data. So being intentional during data collection is very important. And a key one, and I mentioned it before and I'll say it again, is collaborations. We need to collaborate. We need to collaborate because the world is a global village. It's global now. We need to be able to ensure that what we do, the kind of research we do, it accommodates things that are reflective and that can be used across the world. We don't want to just create research that can be used only in Nigeria. We want it to transcend borders. And one way to do that is also by communication, dissemination. Apologies for the errors in the slides, please. Is communication and dissemination. So there are a lot of great research that are out there, but where is it being put? How are people hearing about it? A lot of people, they have their research findings in top journals, but the thing about some of those top journals are not, if we are being fair, they are not accessible to a lot of people. So we need to also consider putting out some of our research findings, some of our research processes, some of the research methods through open sources where people are able to use it, and also not only create our findings or research that we do for academia, we need to also make it usable for practitioners also. So using some of the avenues that are there, technology that you could do a podcast, you could do short write-ups and all of that. There are different ways that you could disseminate. And you don't have, if you want to use publications, that's fine. But also consider ways that practitioners are able to use it. And if practitioners are able to use it, then your research is going to the grassroots where people are able to use it. And so taking all of this into consideration, it is actually taking action. So I'm hoping that after this, people not only just listen to what I've said, but also try to see how they can utilize what they have, the technologies that are around them, to make an impact. And making an impact is not taking it out. It has to be somewhere in particular. It starts from your community and where you are. So we are hoping that we're able to build on that and you're able to make take action. And taking action starts from one step, and it starts from today. So starting from the little things we can do to adopt technology, bring it into the little things you do, and then make an impact in every form of research that you do, every form of practice that you do as educators. How can we adopt the technologies that are made available to us? So I would stop there. I've dropped our Twitter handles and our LinkedIn page, and I would ask if there are questions. Thank you.
Wow, that was so grassroots. I mean, you just took us to the basics, and you took us all the way, gave us tools, which is what the session is, what your session was and is about. Thank you so much, Dr. Itoro. That was so, I mean, it was so practical. We can begin to take some of these tools and make changes. We can use, we know where to get data from, because for me, I was like, I feel like we are short on data in Nigeria, and I didn't even know that we had like these other numerous places to get data from, and how we can begin to do like quantitative and qualitative research, and then, analyze them and make great decisions for the education sector. Thank you so much, Dr. Itoro. That was so enlightening. It was so enlightening. Thank you so much. Please, do we have any questions? Do we have any question for our speaker before she goes? Do we have any question? I'm waiting. I'm also waiting. I want to see your learnings. What did you learn? What are you taking from this moment as well? I want to see that as well. I want to see your learning moments. For me, I now know tools that I can use to get more data. I mean, Mr. Dimeji talked about data before he got in, and now we can see how to get more of this data and then begin to use them to make the education system better in Africa. So that was so great. Thank you, ma'am. What did we learn? To show that you're here, you need to tell me what you've learned. If you have questions, please ask. Someone said you got my head spinning as a researcher. Now my hands are shaking, waiting to dive into grabbing data to enable me work better. I'm glad about that, even for me as well. I'm just like, I know where to get data from. Now I know where to get data from. So I'm excited, I'm pumped. Just made my work easier. Thank you. The chats people are saying thank you so much. Do we have questions? Do we have questions on how to even start a research? So, okay, I'm going to ask a question. So, Dr. Joe, where do we start from? For someone who has never done research before, someone who has no idea, and the person is just like, I want to begin to leverage this data? I want to gather data. Where do I start from? What do I do?
Okay, I think the first step is, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to find out? And so you want to do research. What are you trying to find out? That kind of like helps inform what direction you want to take in analyzing or in getting data or in acquiring it. So the first question is, what are you trying to find out? What's the problem you're trying to solve? So most times when you go for research, you're trying to either solve a problem or you're trying to find out something. So when you identify that, you now start thinking, okay, if I want to find out about this thing, where can I find out about it? Who should I ask? Who should I talk to? Are you trying to talk to people? If you're trying to talk to people, then you start thinking, how do I talk to people? Do I do interviews? Do I do a survey? You think, are they people that are easily available? If they're easily available, then you might want to go for things like interviews, short interviews. If they are not so available, or the number of people you want to ask are a lot, you might want to go for surveys. You might also want to check, are there historical records about what you want to find? Because sometimes what you want to find, if people are not there, maybe it's people, you're trying to find out things that happened so many years ago, and maybe people are not. So you're now trying to think, where can I get those kind of archival data from? So once you identify what you want to do, you think about where can you find it. Then you think about where can you find, or who you can ask, and how do you now find out about those things. And that while you're thinking about that, you might want to start thinking about what's the outcome, what do you expect from it? So from what you're trying to find out. So not necessarily that you're predicting an outcome, but in a way, most times researchers, you have an idea where you think it might go. So it kind of like helps you think what you should do and guide some of your questions without necessarily trying to push those questions or your opinions on people, but it gives you kind of like a baseline of where you're searching for. So if you now decide the kind of data that you want to now collect from those people, are they numerical? Are they numbers? If they are numbers, then you are going for like a quantitative kind of research. If there are things about interviews, what people are saying is a bit more contextual, then you are going for qualitative kind of research. And at the same time, it could be a combination of both, where some of the data you're collecting is quantitative, some of the data you're collecting is qualitative. Then you probably end up with a mixed kind of research, where you have to utilize both types of analysis, quantitative and qualitative. So you now use that and analyze your data, you find one of the, and most times the beauty of the internet is that there's almost nothing new under the sun, maybe new technologies, but ways a lot of human beings think, and maybe questions that you have. You'll be very surprised that you have a question. If you type it on the internet, you see that somebody has asked that kind of question. So there are also those kind of places where if you're trying to analyze a particular data in a way and you're not sure, you could go online. So usually it's either you go to either your colleague, your supervisor to ask about this, but because of the way data is now available, you're not just asking people in your community, you are asking the whole world. If you go online, you're asking people from all over the world how they've approached a particular research or a particular problem. And then you see the options they have. And then you can now go ahead and explore this option that's been there. Will it be applicable for me or would it not? And then you could now start thinking which methods you use. But the main thing is your question, how you collect that data, they determine what you're trying to find out. The questions you have, how you collect the data, will determine how you analyze the data. So kind of like just going through that process. By the time you get there and you analyze the data, you wait and see what interesting thing comes out of the data. And sometimes what you find out is what has already been there. So
Dr. Itoro.
that just tells you,
okay.
That just tells you that what you've done is applicable there too.
All right, that is so beautiful. That is so good. Thank you so much. Someone is asking, where can we get data in Nigeria? She mentioned some. She gave the Nigerian Data Portal, Federal Ministry of Education, Nigeria Bureau of
National Bureau of Statistics.
Okay,
Yes,
national.
they have very interesting data there. The Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics.
Yes, Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics.
Yeah,
Yes. And also international repositories like UNESCO,
yes,
World Bank,
IMF, IFC.
yes.
They all collect data for Nigeria. And so there are quite a lot of them that collect data for Nigeria about aspects of Nigeria. So you could get that. And most of the ministries, so not just the Ministry of Education, I mentioned the Ministry of Education just for education, but if you are doing something related to agriculture and all of that, you go to the different MDAs. They collect data also. So it might not be publicly available, but they have it.
All right. You said, but how accurate are these data given that the mode of collection is not clear?
Yes, so that's the thing. Sometimes that's the reason why when you go out you find out that people say, oh, there's no data from Nigeria, there's no data from Africa. It's because it's not clear. They don't say how the data is collected, so people don't want to use it. So that's one of the things I talk about, intentional data collection. So data research processes. If you, as a researcher, outline the way your data has been collected, it's easier for international organizations to look at your data and say, okay, the way you collected it, okay, that's actually a good approach to do it. And it's something that they can verify. You know, you've outlined how you've done it, the processes, your data, when you collect your data, you keep it for minimum of 3 years. Because sometimes you finish publishing it and then they ask you a question based on the data. It might not be what you analyze, but you need to be able to go back and say, oh, this data is actually available, and just make sure you have permissions to, if you need to share the data. So when you are collecting data, you also need to collect permissions for it and always try and use it for what you collect it for.
Okay, so one way we can begin to give the right data is to tell people how you even came about it in the first place. Yes, and to make it publicly known. And for every work, for every researcher here, it's also good to ensure that your work is peer reviewed. It helps a lot when your work is peer reviewed, so that people can see the gaps and the lapses in your work, and you can make the corrections before you publish any paper or any research work that you've done. Someone also asked, is it the same question? What's the hack for you? Okay, as in collecting raw data. Okay,